This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Forstag, our managing director, and Jenna Forstrom, our community manager. This week, we're talking about when it's time to start looking for your next job. Our show is brought to you by Hack the Hidden Job Market. As many as 8 out of 10 job openings never get advertised. Is your dream job one of them? Learn how to uncover hidden jobs and get noticed by the hiring managers who fill them. Get started today at maxlist.org/course. None of us expects to stay in one job until retirement. But when is it time to go? And how do you get ready? Our guest expert this week is Rob Walker. He writes the Workologist column for the Sunday New York Times. Rob says you should always be planning and looking for your next job, even when you're happy in your current position. Later in the show, he'll explain why. Ben Forstag has found an annual list of the best and worst jobs in 2016. The CareerCast website bases those rankings on factors like pay, stress, and sector growth. Is your occupation one of them? Find out in a moment. How do you market yourself to employers in other states? That's our question of the week. It comes from listener Carl Borton. Jenna Forstrom offers her advice shortly. But first, as always, let's check in with the Mac's List team. Jenna, Ben, tell me, when have you two known that it's time to leave a job?
When you start playing the lottery too much. I previously had a job that I was really unhappy at, and I felt very trapped in the job, and I'm not even joking. It felt like the only way I'd ever be able to escape from the job was by winning the lottery. And so I would catch myself on the way home from work, stopping at the convenience store and buying a ticket for the Mega Ball and hoping man, I really hope this works out, because if it doesn't, I have to go to work tomorrow.
Oh my gosh. Those are tough odds in the lottery.
Yeah. And that's clearly not rational thinking. And what I tell people when they give me kind of similar circumstances that they're in, I tell them, you can get out, you should get out. If it's causing that much misery, find a way to leave right away and you'll find something else.
And I have to ask, did you win a prize?
Never.
Jenna, how about you? When have you known it was time to leave a job?
I have this app that tells me what I've done on social media for the last decade. And I recently got notified that I had posted on Facebook that I had put in my 2 weeks notice at a previous role 7 years ago. So that was a lifeguarding position, and I was 22 and I had earned my college degree and was still just lifeguarding for the fun of it. And it just got to this point where I was why do I keep doing this? I'm a highly educated young person and I'm dealing with toddlers screaming and old people wanting to swim and police the swimming lanes when it's open swim, and just dealing with stuff that I was nope, time to grow up and use my degree. And so the final straw that broke the camel's back was they scheduled me for Halloween, and it was my first Halloween being 21. So I really wanted to go out with my friends and not lifeguard. So I was yep, I'm going to Halloween the day before I quit. So that was for me. I was thinking about, back to a previous podcast when we had Tess Viglin on, and she was talking about, when your ego is so bruised that it's painful to come into work. And so I think something like that would be a good sign of, hey, it's time for me to move on.
I remember Tess making that point, and I've seen others say that too. If your job is affecting your health, or you're not sleeping well, or it's causing stress, and or you just dread coming into the office, those are all good signs that it's time to move on. For me, I've had a number of different jobs over the years. Some have been limited, and I knew they were going to end at a certain time. Things like political campaigns, or I worked on a Y2K project, and that definitely had a hard stop. Other times I left to do something else at graduate school. And when I reflect back on all the different transitions I've had, and I think Rob will talk more about this, the ones that went the best and led to the most rewarding opportunities were the ones I planned for. And I didn't always plan Sometimes you can't, but when I had the opportunity to plan and I did that, I was much happier with the position I got. Well, thanks. Well, speaking of research and planning, let's turn to Ben, who every week is out there poking around the nooks and crannies of the internet, looking for websites, books, and tools you can use in your job search and your career. Ben, what have you uncovered for our listeners this week?
This week, I want to share a list of the best and worst jobs in 2016, and this comes from the website CareerCast. So I'm always a little skeptical when I see these lists of like the best of whatever, the best movies of 2016, the best pop songs from the last 30 years, because it's like, who decides what's best? But I really like this list because there's some really solid methodology behind it. It's not like a normative judgment of like these jobs suck and these jobs are great, but rather it's based on rankings coming from feedback from professionals who are in these jobs. And they're really clear about how they create these rankings. And they use things like environmental issues, emotional factors, physical requirements, the income, both the average starting salary and the maximum earning potential, the employment outlook into the future, and then 11 different measurements of stress, how much stress it puts on you as a professional. So there are a lot of jobs in this list. Do you guys want to guess on what the best job in 2016 is?
Helping to raise puppies?
Close. No, not at all.
I would say like being a celebrity or YouTube influencer.
I feel like I'm learning a lot about you guys based on those guesses. The best is actually data scientist, and this is based on salary, the work environment, and the job prospects going out there. Again, this is not the exhaustive list of every job out there. I don't even think they had puppy raising and celebrity as options. Sorry, guys.
Or like naming colors of crayons. I think that would be a really satisfying job.
I'm guessing the job prospects are not really high on that one.
But like, how cool would that be? Like, this is Pantone, blah, blah, blah.
That would be fun. Yeah. You want to guess what the worst job is according to these rankings?
I would guess something that involves lots of hard labor and stress, maybe coal miner.
I thought it was going to be something like that too. But actually, according to this list, the worst profession to have is being a print journalist, which surprised me. But I think a lot of that is based on salary and job prospects, because print, as we all know and as we've been hearing for 10 years, is slowly dying out as a medium. But definitely worth checking out if you're looking to change careers or you just want to see where your career ranks there. It's on the CareerCast website, and we'll have the URL in the show notes.
Well, thank you, Ben. And if you have a suggestion for Ben, please write him, and we may share your idea on the show. Ben's address is an easy one. It is ben@maxlist.org. Now let's turn to you, our listeners. Jenna Forstrom, our community manager, joins us to answer one of your questions. Jenna, what is in the MaxList mailbag this week?
This week's question comes from Carl Boren, and he asks,
Hey, this is Carl from Gainesville, Florida, and I'm just wondering, what is the best way to market myself to employers in other states?
Great question. Hey, Carl, thank you so much for calling in. And here are a few ways to make yourself more marketable than the in-state competition. So first of all, we talk about this a lot, is using a local physical address on your resume and any contact information. That gives the illusion that you're already here. It makes it easier to connect. So maybe reach out to friends or family in the area that you want to move into and see if they'd be cool with you using their address. Another way to do that is to mention your connection to the state. So I know Ben used this when he was applying for jobs. He was moving from Washington, D.C., and he was saying in his cover letters and in his contacts, I am marrying an Oregonian. We are moving to Oregon and raising our children here. So it was like, it wasn't a, hey, I'm looking to find a job, and when I get a job, I'll show up. It's like, this is happening whether or not you're helping me, and I'm a huge asset, so you should hire me. So those are my tips. Mac and Ben, do you have any more?
Well, you already stole my story, Jenna. But no, I think the key is more so than using someone else's address, which I think can help, but is kind of a gimmick. I think most importantly is making it very clear your intent to move is like pre-existing and going to happen. And I think sometimes what that really means is that you have to actually set a date for when you're moving and completely plan on making that move, whether you have a job or not. And you'll be amazed at how much easier it is to convey your message to prospective employers once you've got that deadline looming over you.
I think setting a deadline is a good idea. Some people I know are uncomfortable coming to a community without having a job lined up. One way to manage that is to plan 1 or 2 short job hunting trips. And if you, as Jenna suggested, you have friends or family in the community where you want to move, ask if you can sleep on their couch for a week. And saying that you're going to be somewhere during a certain set of dates gives you the opportunity to contact people that you might want to meet for informational interviews, or to tell employers, hey, I'm going to be in your community on these dates because I plan to move, to your point, Ben, to your town after this date. Would you have 15 to 20 minutes to meet with me for an informational interview or to check in on my application? And just showing up and being there is just, I think, is a game changer.
And the other thing I'd add is, and you mentioned this, so being out of state is a barrier, right? And I don't think you should leave it up to the employer to figure out how to overcome that barrier in terms of how are we going to do the interview? How are we going to, know what this person is like? I think it's up to you as the job seeker to provide some options for how you could overcome this barrier. So one thing I did when I was applying from out of state was say, like, I'm happy to do interviews by Skype, or even potentially fly out and meet you for an interview because I'm really passionate about this job and I don't want my current, 3,000 miles distance standing between us and what could be a beautiful professional relationship.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thanks, guys. And thanks, Carl, for calling in.
Well, thanks, Jenna and Ben. And thank you, Carl, for your question. If you have a question for us, please email Jenna. Her address is jenna@maxlist.org. Or call our listener line. That number is area code 716-JOB TALK. That's 716-562-8225. If we use your question on our show, you'll receive a free copy of our upcoming book, Land Your Dream Job Anywhere, that we're publishing on February 1st, 2017. Our show is brought to you by Hack the Hidden Job Market, the new online course from MaxList available on November 1st. To learn more, go to www.maxlist.org/course. Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Rob Walker. Rob Walker writes the Workologist column for the Sunday business section of the New York Times. He also blogs for Design Observer. And he's the author of 4 books and has written for publications like Slate.com, New York Times Magazine, Money, and The American Lawyer. He joins us today from New Orleans. Rob, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So our topic this week, as you know, is it time to look for your next job? And you and I know that, and our listeners as well, nobody spends their career at one company anymore. How long do hiring managers expect people to stay at one job these days?
Well, as you know, I think that's going to vary. And as you know, what I do with the Workologist is kind of, driven from the other end of this equation, with people who are workers who have some dilemma. And the question of should I look for a new job is a very frequent one. And I just got
Rob,
a question that I'm answering. Yeah.
Let me ask you, why do you think that's so? Why does that question come up again and again?
Well, I think that, I suppose it's self-selecting a little bit. You wouldn't be writing to the Workologist if everything was great in your job. So you're probably at some point of a quasi-crisis or something, or at least having some kind of second thoughts. But, more seriously, I think it comes up for a reason you just alluded to, which is that there's this very powerful sense that, one way or another, you're probably, whatever job you're in, it's probably not going to be the job you are in until retirement. So it's kind of always on people's minds. And I think that that's healthy. I think it should kind of be always on people's minds. But I just got a funny flip of this question the other day. that I'm answering. Probably that column will be out by the time this airs. But it was actually from someone who has been at a job for a few years, loves it, loves the people, finds the work very satisfying. But this person, and I don't remember if it's he or she, so I'm just going to say he is concerned about, just how it might look on his resume if 15 years from now something happens and the department gets liquidated or something like that. Will it look bad on his resume if he's just been at one place for so long? Which shows how powerful this kind of idea is, that not only is moving around something that is going to happen to you, but it's kind of beneficial, and it's kind of almost suspicious if you haven't moved around a lot and done a lot of different things. Now, what I'm telling this person actually is that he's in a position where I actually don't think he should be looking for a new job in any active way. I think that, trying to game out the opinions of a future hiring manager, hypothetically, is a terrible reason to quit a job you really enjoy. And if you have a job you really enjoy, you should stick with it. But all of which is to circle a long way around to, I think that hiring managers, when I talk to, HR people and stuff like that, I don't think that there is a hard and fast rule about how long they expect you to stay at a given place. I think a lot more has to do with whether you have the skills that they are looking for, and, whether there's a screaming red flag on your resume. If you have, if you had 7 different jobs in a year and a half, you might not want to list them all, because that looks a little suspicious. It looks like maybe there's a problem. But I think that hiring manager side, in my experience in talking to people about it, has actually become sort of more flexible, and I think that that's a good thing.
Well, let's put ourselves in the shoes of job seekers or people who are currently employed, and you hear from them all the time through your column. What do you say to people? When do those people know that it's time to leave, that it's time to move on? What signs should they look for?
Well, 2 things. One is that my big rule about all of this stuff is that rather than have a mindset of I'm not looking for a job versus I'm totally all in, desperately trying to look for a job, I think it's wiser to have a kind of sort of make it part of your routine and your practice to be networking and aware of what the opportunities might be. Take informational interviews even when you're not really looking, so that you're not starting from scratch. As far as so have that going on before you're making any decision, that just make it part of your life. As far as when, the signs to look for, one of the things that comes up a lot with people who write to me is people who are kind of looking around at what is going on with the larger business or even business sector that they're in, and they're worried. And I think that there is an excellent case to be made for trying to, if you sense that, there might be a round of layoffs coming or something like that, that's an excellent sign to get out ahead of it and be proactive and don't wait for things to get really desperate.
You talked about the importance of, always keeping an eye out or thinking about your next opportunity during the course of a career and doing things like taking informational interviews. What other advice do you have for people to do a sort of, I don't want to say passive, but perhaps low-key search or just staying open to opportunities? What should they make part of their routine besides perhaps saying yes to informational interviews?
Sure. I mean, I think just you don't have to devote tremendous amounts of time to this, but checking the job boards, seeing what's out there, looking for things that if I were to apply for something, what would be here that would interest me, or what's, is there a lot of it? Is there a little bit? Are there skills that people are looking for that I don't have? Can I then acquire those skills? And I kind of like to think of it as a way to feed back into whatever work routine or work scenario you're currently in. Like with this person who is in the job that he likes, one of his concerns was, that he could probably make more money if he moved around, which may be true. And that's, of course, an internal dilemma that we all face, is what's more important, money or other factors in in any given job situation. But with that person, I said, instead of worrying too much about that in the future, I think it's very healthy to just once a year, at least do enough work in seeing what jobs are out there to try to get a sense of what the salary range is and what you might be able to get, so that you have a sense of your own worth and whether you're, again, this feeds back into your current situation, whether you're being overpaid, underpaid, fairly paid, etc. So it's all kind of about working it into part of your routine. And I know that some people really resist this because they think that it means that I'm saying that you just have to spend your whole weekend job hunting. That's not the case. You want to just sort of make it feel less like it is a giant onerous task. Keep your resume up to date. Take your resume out and look at it and see, like, what have I done since this? What could I be doing that could add to this? And it gives you something it can actually sort of add to your current job satisfaction and opportunities and so on.
What are some of the warning signs, Rob, that a job may no longer be a good fit? What should people keep an eye on?
Well, another thing that comes up is people who are worried that, their responsibilities are kind of being reduced and sort of subsumed by others. I think that that's the biggest one in the experiences that I have. And it is often a tell, even if it's not a conscious decision by management. That it's not like it has to be a grand conspiracy to slowly freeze you out or something. But if it just seems like the business is evolving in such a way where your skills are less of a fit than the skills of some other people, I think that's a pretty clear warning sign.
And what about, we talked about looking for jobs outside of your current company or organization. Should people also be looking for opportunities to grow internally?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's part of what I'm getting at with this sort of, checking the job boards and whatnot to see what skills. If you see that there's XYZ skill that seems to be in demand, that could be an incentive for you to figure out if there's a way for you to acquire that skill within the context that you're already working. And I'm a big fan of trying to be a little bit more proactive rather than sort of, I do get mail from people who will sort of say, gee, I'm not really getting enough to do, and I've asked for more to do, but they don't give me more to do. Well, then try telling them what you're going to do. Come to them. In my experience with managers, if you come to a manager and say, I need more to do, you're sort of creating a problem for that person that they then have to oh, great, now I have to sit around and figure out what to do with you. And if you come to them and say, hey, I've asked around among my colleagues, we need a little more help in this area. I think I could pick that up. How about if I do, or, and on top of that, I have an idea for how to go about it or what new initiative we could start. Then you're not causing a problem at all. You're causing a solution. And I think that's a lot more appealing to everybody.
Yeah, I think employers are, whether they're hiring or they're managing someone, they're always looking for people who are going to solve problems and make not only their lives easier, but the company more productive and the bottom line better.
Sure. I think it's true on an organizational level, and it's true if, in fairness, it's true just on a human level. Probably your manager has a lot to do. And the more you can solve problems or even proactively solve problems, the more appealing you are to them. And that is a very human thing.
Now, when people are ready to make that move, what's your best advice, Rob, about how to exit your organization or your company? How should people do that?
How to exit in terms of?
When you're ready to move on to your next job, how do you handle that departure?
Well, I think that whatever procedures or sort of norms are in place for any given company, in some places it's 2 weeks and all that kind of stuff. I'm a big advocate of that. Beyond that, I'm an advocate of trying to. It depends on the scenario, right? If it's a place that you're leaving because you really didn't like the job, that may be the end of the story. You give your 2 weeks and that's it. If it's a place where there are particular people who you should give some thought to, who are the people here who I would really want to stay on good terms with, and make the effort, make the extra effort. I get questions about, I get questions from people who are quitting in a huff and want to write the angry kiss-off letter, one sort or another. I'm not a big fan of that. Or I should say that I am a big fan of writing the angry kiss-off letter, but then not sending it. Keep it to yourself. Have the cathartic exercise, but don't try to settle scores on your way out the door anywhere. It's just not a productive move in the long run. And whenever I write about this, I always get horror stories from people who, have done that, have written the cathartic angry letter to the ex-boss and really regretted it, because it can haunt you.
Well, thank you, Rob. Tell us what's coming up next for you.
Well, the next thing that I'll have, aside from the column in the New York Times, is actually going to be in the magazine section in late November. There's a special design issue that I'm a part of, and they're going to have some really exciting stuff. So I would advise people to look out for that. I forget which Sunday it is. It might be the third Sunday in November, something like that. They should be buying the Times every weekend, of course. So.
Well, I am a regular reader, and I know many of our listeners are too, and we'll keep an eye out for that. People can learn more about you by visiting your website, I know, www.robwalker.net. Rob, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
All right, we're back in the Max List studio with Jenna and Ben. Now, what are your thoughts about my conversation with Rob?
I think the most important thing he said was burn no bridges. Like, no matter how bad your experience was, don't write that ugly letter or that vindictive letter or the righteous indignation thing. It's never worth it. And I certainly had moments in my life where I wanted to write that kind of thing, and I'm so glad I never actually followed through on that desire. And I think also, like, even in bad situations, you can find good, redeemable relationships that can help you later on in your career. And so, think twice before you do anything that's going to burn a bridge.
I liked his advice about writing the letter but not sending it. I think that could be cathartic.
Yeah, I've written quite a few letters in my head. Never actually put pen to paper, though.
Yeah. Jenna, what are your thoughts?
I really liked his point about writing the letter. And I agree with you. I think there is something about like writing something down. It's very like therapeutic, or like 10 things that I hate about my job, and like just scratching that out and then writing like, kind of doing the flip side, like 10 things I love about my job. And it just kind of resets you and lets you see how like maybe your subconscious brain is processing, like if it's just a stressful bad day, like you can almost like crumple it up and throw it away. And as long as it's not somewhere where you're like leaving it out for your coworkers or printing it so like it's in the printer, I think it's helpful, and it could, if it releases it and you can move on, it's really helpful. But agreed, like don't burn any bridges. There's tons of YouTube videos of people just telling their bosses off and to go off and find new things, and it's just never a good idea. It's hard professionally.
Yeah, I wouldn't ever write these things at the job you're at. Go home and do this kind of thing. Yeah. Play it safe.
Yeah, don't be stupid.
Well, I agree, and I had no idea there were YouTube videos like that out there, so I've learned something new today, Jenna. I will say I agree wholeheartedly with Rob's first point, which was always be thinking about your next job or where you want to go, and recognize that in a 40-year career, you aren't going to be at the same place for 4 decades, likely. Sometimes it happens, but I've met people who've told me, I've been employed by this place. I never have to look or worry about finding my next job, and they're in their 30s or 40s. And often that, even though they may want to stay, that doesn't happen. So you always want to have a plan B.
Yeah, I think the assumption that you're irreplaceable or that you're going to stay at a job forever can really come back to haunt you. We've seen that. We've seen that here at Max List, like just with like Intel went through a major layoff, and there's a whole bunch of people that never thought they'd have to look for a job ever again and are learning how to like update a resume and network. And so just the idea that we're not dealing with people, we're dealing with large organizations that have huge priorities. And so just being cognizant of that is fair.
Yeah, there's so much that you can't control, like what might happen to the stock price of a company that employs you. But there are things you can control, like thinking about what you might do if you did leave your current position and taking some of the steps that Rob mentioned, like networking, taking informational interviews and checking out salary data and the like. Well, thank you both, and thank you, Rob, for joining us, and thank you, our listeners, for downloading this episode. If you like what you hear, please sign up for our free weekly newsletter. In each issue, we give you the key points of that week's show. We also include links to all the resources mentioned, and you get a transcript of the full episode. If you subscribe to the newsletter now, we'll send you our job seeker checklist. In one easy-to-use file, we show you all the steps you need to take to find a great job. Get your free newsletter and checklist today. Go to maxlist.org/podcast. Join us next Wednesday when our special guest will be Alyssa Doucette. She'll explain how women can shatter the glass ceiling. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.